Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On this episode we're taking it back to the NES and looking at a shoot 'em up that I just recently got my first clear on. And man, this was a challenging one. We're checking out Super Spy Hunter, developed by Tokai Engineering and published by Sunsoft, released into the NES in 1992. This was known outside of the US as Battle Formula, and when Sunsoft had the rights to Spy Hunter, brought it to the Western markets as Super Spy Hunter instead of Super Spy Hunter 2. Through 6 stages, you'll try to stay on the road and stay on the swivel, but before we get too much further, let's check out the story. In the year 2525, you're a secret agent driving the versatile Interceptor, a car with a chassis of weaponry and gadgets that would make James Bond jealous, along with the ability to transform into an air and sea craft. You'll race through 6 stages in pursuit of the infamous ringleader of X and dismantle their doomsday device. Fasten your seatbelts, we're about to experience some turbulence. Gameplay-wise, you've got a 2D vertical shoot-'em-up racer hybrid where you'll blast your way through 6 stages of pure 8-bit mayhem. You'll battle across the highway and everything else in between to try to get to each stage's boss and move on to the next one. Much like the original Spy Hunter, you can throttle and brake the Interceptor by pressing up or down on the D-pad, and minding your speed is going to be important throughout the game. You've got 8 power-ups that will be on the beds of semi-trucks that cycle through blue and red icons. L restores and upgrades your hit points, P is the weapon upgrades, of which there are 4 power levels, R is the recharge and increased fire rate, and C is the cannon automation. The B icon is a screen clearing bomb, the G icon launches an option that will wipe everything and damage all enemies on screen, and the O will drop an oil slick behind you, and the T will deploy them Ben-Hur spiked rims along 1-up icons. Off top, there are 3 power-ups that you want to max out as soon as possible, being your hit points, firepower, and fire rate, as these will be your best ally next to the cannon automation, which works as an auto aim for your rooftop cannons. You can toggle it back and forth by grabbing the C icon again, but that will revert it to manual control, which is slower to manage, but it can still be effective. Long story short, keep the automation toggled on to reduce the strain of dealing with enemies around you. Keeping your firepower at the highest level for as long as possible is also something you're going to want to and eventually need to do, as bosses will absolutely clap your cheeks if you are at base level. You'll know you're at max power when your car is blue instead of the red when you start the game. Stages will have numerous hazards like jumps over water and eventually pits of lava. The hazards you'll encounter through the game's 6 stages are pretty unique and have a few that, if you know how to approach it, will make them far less of a headache. Stage 1 starts you off with jumps and water traps to navigate, and there's also a bit where you have to drive across the containers of semi-trucks that are also suspended over water. Stage 2 has various quicksand pits that you'll need to drive around or attempt to barrel through, which may result in you disappearing into the Sarlacc pits. Stage 3 puts you on a bridge network where each exit takes to a different section that will loop if you take the wrong path. Stage 4 takes away the guardrails and adds heavy rain and winds that can knock you off the sides. This stage also has a part where you do high-speed jumps across huge gaps, which looks sick here. Stage 5 takes you to the water, and later the air as you transform the Intercept into a boat and eventually a plane. Stage 6 is a gauntlet that throws everything at you, along with a few new hazards like lava pits with ramps in various positions and a laser chamber. Depending on where the skull sensor is on the ground, will guide you through or around the trap. This took me a while to figure out, since you can activate the barriers and still get through while they recharge. However, you can also completely avoid triggering them by going around the skull when there's only one, and going between the skulls when there's 2. The jumps over lava require you to cook it on the throttle, and knowing where those ramps are going to be is your best bet for becoming barbecue on the lava pit below. I died at least 100 times on this level alone, and it's right when you think you got it in the bag like easy money is when Super Spy Hunter brings you back down to earth with its difficulty. While you can power yourself up pretty heavily, once you get knocked into enough hazards or get tossed off the road completely, you start back with at least 1 power level less each time, with the exception of keeping the cannon automation until you burn all your socks or get the C icon a second time. Bosses are at the end of each stage, and these encounters start off pretty buck, and it's likely you'll be at base power level. You can tango with the first couple bosses on base power level, but you will get smoked once you get to stage 3's boss. Bosses will have a few forms during encounters and will increase their attack behaviors the more you damage them. Some bosses will have projectiles you can shoot through instead of dodge, like some gray bullets and missiles. Encounters get increasingly difficult, and besides being blown to bits, you can get crushed on the edges of arenas if you're really unlucky. Also, lasers, in any capacity, are a one-hit kill regardless of your health meter. Being at max power for each boss is the fastest way to get through these encounters, but the final boss basically requires you to be at full power and fire rate, otherwise once you get to that final damage phase, you likely won't be able to cut through their bombardment of shots. The last battle is pretty buck and easily the most challenging part of the game, on top of arguably the hardest stage in the game. This one was rewarding to clear after getting bodied by it for who knows how long. Graphics wise, Super Spy Hunter is one of the more complex games in the NES, with a lot of visual effects that not a lot of games pulled off on the hardware. It's a substantial upgrade from its original entry and the arcade sequel Spy Hunter 2. Super Spy Hunter has several scrolling techniques like cornering when you move along bridges and bends in the road, and there's also several weather effects like rain and wind that sway the suspension bridge back and forth. The The illest part is when you make the huge jumps between the bridges that shoot you into the air, causing you to free fall and take out all the aerial enemies. Each stage has several mechanics and graphical features mixed in alongside the furious action on the motorway. When you slow the interceptor down, you can see the waters move below you, and when you're cooking it, the screen moves very fast with the action flying at you at Mach 5 speed. This is a visually impressive title for the NES and an experience to play since it does smack on all cylinders. There's a few hazards that will look cool but also be some of the most dangerous things on the board. The mines on stage 5 will sway on the water back and forth, but these are also one-hit kills if you so much as graze them. The cavernous tunnel on stage 6 will also have the lights flicker as you approach the jumps and with parts of the roadway being overtaken by debris. Enemy sprites look good with bosses being the standouts and basic enemies also having a good variety of ground and air-based enemies. Boss sprites are huge and will take up a healthy chunk of the screen with a few of them filling the entire screen at points. Base enemies also have a similar visual style to Taito's Sky Shark, and enemy animations are also pretty good with a variety of damage states and movement. There's also a fair amount of flicker, which is to be expected with the NES hardware and the amount of stuff happening on the screen, and there are points where there is slowdown in a couple places, where again, the screen is going absolutely insane when this does happen. Sound-wise, Super Spy Hunter straight up cooks with a high-energy soundtrack composed by the trio of Naoki Kodaka, Nobuyuki, and Seiya, and the team smashes it with a killer soundtrack in true Sunsoft fashion. The iconic Peter Gunn theme from the original is also remixed for this entry, and the tunes absolutely smoke. It's no surprise the soundtrack is full of belters, since Kodaka also worked on the original Spy Hunter, along with the majority of the Sunsoft scores, including Blaster Master, Batman, and Trindicilius. In-game audio is also fire with chunky explosions and unique cues for picking up red or blue power upgrades. When bumping other cars or skirting across the road, you get a decent soundbite for tires skidding on the pavement and crashing into other vehicles. To keep you tapped into what's happening on screen, visual and audio indicators will sound an alarm when a jump or major change in the environment is coming. Sunsoft was known for solid tunes and audio in their games, and this follows suit being an all-around smasher. Super Spy Hunter is a stellar game, blending ground-based vehicle combat with a frantic shoot-'em-up. It's got style for days and is hell of a challenge to get through the game's 6-stage run. It also gives you a variety of ways to go about your vehicle builds, and while certain items are important, you can get creative and try different strategies. The only real fault I can give it is the flickering and slowdown in places, and the at times brutal difficulty spikes, both of which can be managed but will take patience and practice on those more difficult sections. It's a visual tour de force that is honestly one of the best looking games for the system, pushing the hardware while keeping performance fairly sturdy. Super Spy Hunter gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes highly recommended to shoot 'em up fans and those interested in elevations to games like Bump and Jump or the original Spy Hunter. The gameplay will get you hooked once you wrap your head around what you can do and ways to make the interceptor unstoppable, and even when you're getting smoked by the game, you'll figure out ways to break through. There were legit parts of this game that took me hours to get through, but once you get it dialed in, you can finish this game in about 40 minutes, granted you can do it in one go. This being a late NES release also means the price is typically in the moderate to high range, with loose cards going for around $50 and going for around $200 for complete copies in the NTSC region. If you can find this for a good price and are into vertical shoot 'em ups that are unique, go for it, as it's a great addition to an NES or shoot 'em up collection. Otherwise, play this one however you can if you're interested. And I thank you so much if you made it this far into the video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. Glad you use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.